All right, let's dive into something really chilling today. The Freeway Phantom. A serial killer case that went cold in the early 70s in Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
Everything we're going over is from the Wikipedia page about this case, and it's a lot.
Yeah, this one stayed with DC for a long time. The mystery of who it was,
Yeah.
it still hangs over the city.
It's crazy, right? Like, the deeper you go, the worse it gets. 6 black girls, murder between April of 71 and September of 72.
And so young.
Carol Denise Spinks, Darlenia Denise Johnson, Brenda Faye Crockett, Moshe Yates, Brenda Denise Woodard, and Diane Denise Williams.
We have to remember their names.
Absolutely. And think about their families, their ages. Like, the youngest was only 13. It's just,
Brenda Faye Crockett was only 10.
yeah, 10 years old. They were all abducted, and then their bodies, they were found near highways dumped around D.C.
And a lot of them without their shoes.
That detail, right, plus where they were found, who the victims were, it all just created so much fear. Imagine, like, being a parent back then.
Yeah, that feeling that any highway could be where the Phantom.
And some of the specifics of these murders. I mean, Brenda Crockett's case, she actually called home a few times while she was missing.
Those calls are really disturbing. Almost certainly, she was being made to call by the killer, to mislead the investigation.
It's like, not just a kidnapping, but he was playing these mind games. In the calls, she told her family she was in a cab, on her way home, even said she was in Virginia.
Which was a lie. And the whole time, he was likely right there.
It's just
Yeah.
chilling. So messed up.
You buy him time, sent the police in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
That kind of calculated cruelty.
And then, tragically, despite those calls, they found her body the next day. And Brenda Denise Woodard, her case. She was found wearing her shoes, which was different. And there was this strange note in her coat pocket.
That note is a big piece of this whole thing. It reads, quote, "This is tantamount to my insensitivity to people, especially women. I will admit the others when you catch me if you can. Freeway Phantom." End quote.
Wow! Misspellings, the random capitals. It's like someone was telling it to her and she was writing it down.
That's what most people think, yeah.
Yeah.
He made her write it.
Made her.
Investigators think he dictated it and she wrote it in her own school notebook, maybe? There's even been speculation she might have known him, just based on the way she wrote. Creepy.
So he wasn't just, kidnapping them and killing them. He was making them take part in... God, it's monstrous.
Yeah. It adds a whole other level to this case.
So with all this happening, what were the police doing? The public had to be freaking out.
Oh, yeah. So the Metropolitan Police, they got together with some other agencies. They formed this huge task force to find the Freeway Phantom. It was a massive undertaking.
But they never caught him.
No, it's still unsolved.
How? Why?
Well, remember, this was the early 70s. Forensic tech back then was, well, it wasn't anything like what we have now. And on top of that, a lot of the case files, they've been lost or they're incomplete.
You're kidding. Crucial evidence just gone.
It's awful for the families knowing that.
So they were already behind, technology-wise. And then missing files. Did they even have any solid leads?
There were a few that got their attention. One early one was this group called the Green Vega Rapists. They were doing a bunch of rapes and kidnappings around D.C. around the same time as the Phantom.
Interesting. Maybe not the Phantom himself, but maybe connected.
Exactly. And they often worked near the Beltway, which made people wonder. But their M.O., it wasn't the same as the Phantoms. They talked to some gang members who were in prison already for other crimes, but nothing concrete.
Dead end. Who else?
Well, and this inmate at Lorton Prison, he said he had some inside info about the case.
Really? Did he know the Phantom?
He claimed he knew somebody involved, and he gave some specifics about one of the murders that the police hadn't released. Seemed legit. But the guy wanted to stay anonymous, and the investigators agreed.
Right. Got to protect your source. But something happened, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. Big time. So there was an election in Maryland, and one of the candidates, he made this big announcement about a break in the Freeway Phantom case. Specifically mentioned the inmate at Lorton.
Oh, man. That's not good.
Nope. Total breach of trust. The inmate shut down, refused any more interviews, eventually denied ever saying anything.
Wow. So that lead?
Yeah.
Gone.
Yep. Back to square one. Just shows how delicate these investigations are.
Awful. So what else? Any other leads at all?
There were a couple more. 2 former police officers, Edward Selman and Tommy Bernard Simmons. They were arrested for the murder of a young girl, Angela Denise Barnes.
Wait, hold on. Ex-cops.
Yeah, it was a big deal at the time. For a while, Everyone thought Angela's murder was connected to the Freeway Phantom, but they ruled it out
So
eventually.
another dead end. This is rough. We're not getting very far.
It's true. But each of these leads, even the ones that went cold, they helped the investigators get a better sense of what was going on in D.C. back then.
Makes sense. So anyone else stand out?
There was one more. In 1977, they arrested this guy, Robert Elwood Askins, a computer tech. He was charged with kidnapping and raping a woman in his house in D.C. Detective Lloyd Davis was the one questioning him, and he realized Askins had a history of violence against women. A long one.
Like what?
Like, when he was just 19, back in '38, he poisoned 5 prostitutes with cyanide-laced whiskey.
Oh my God.
One of them died. 2 days later, he stabbed another prostitute to death.
This is insane. So then what?
They arrested him, said he was criminally insane, and sent him to St. Elizabeth's Hospital here in D.C.
Well, at least he was locked up.
For a while. They let him out in '52. Less than 5 months later, he strangled another woman to death.
He strangled her. How could they let him out?
The way they thought about mental illness was very different back then, and they didn't know as much about recidivism. It's a complicated issue.
So what happened after the third murder?
He got convicted of second-degree murder, went to prison. But it didn't stop there. After they released him, the violence kept going, which is how he ended up getting arrested for that kidnapping and rape in '77. And that's how he popped up on their radar for the Phantom case.
This guy, he just kept going. But how does he connect to the Freeway Phantom?
Remember that weird note in Brenda Denise Woodard's pocket? The one with the word tantamount?
Yeah, I remember. What about it?
Turns out, tantamount was Robert Elwood Askins' favorite word.
Mm-hmm.
People who knew him said he used it constantly.
What? That's a very specific coincidence.
Right. They searched his place, hoping to find something, anything, to link him to the Phantom. Nothing. Askins denied everything, of course.
So another dead end? It's like the Freeway Phantom just vanished?
He did, in a way. And back then, investigators didn't have many options for tracking him down. Think what they could have done with DNA, computer databases, all the forensics we have now. Maybe the smallest clue would have been all it took.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. What if they could use all that stuff on these cold cases? Would we have answers then?
It's possible, you know. Maybe a hair, a fingerprint, a drop of blood, something they didn't think was important then. Maybe it's the key.
We'll have to see if science catches up to this mystery someday. Well, we've covered a lot, so let's take a break and let all this sink in. We'll be back soon to keep digging into the haunting case of the Freeway Phantom.
It's wild, you know, how time affects cases like this. Makes things harder to see, but then maybe. Also gives us a new perspective.
Yeah, it's like some stuff gets lost, memories fade, people are gone. But then the tech, it keeps getting better, right? We can do things they couldn't even dream of back then.
Exactly. That's why we can't just give up on these cold cases. Look at all the ones they've solved years later because of DNA or whatever new tech they've got. It gives you hope. Maybe someday those families will get some answers.
It's like, even if it takes a long time, justice can still happen. And it's not just about catching whoever did it. It's about showing those families, showing everyone that those victims matter.
Yeah. Remembering them. Seeing how these crimes affected their families, their whole community.
You know what's weird to me? We hear about Zodiac, Ted Bundy, Jack the Ripper. But the Freeway Phantom? Not so much. Why do you think that is?
It is interesting. Criminologists, sociologists, they've been trying to figure that out for a long time. Media back then, how the case was handled, even the kind of crimes. Lots of things to consider.
I've got a theory. Think it's because the victims were young Black girls. Like, their stories didn't matter as much to people.
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
But probably part of it. Racial bias, societal stuff. It definitely affects how we see crimes, you know, how they're investigated, if we even remember them. We see it all the time.
It's messed up. Some stories, people latch onto them. Others, they just fade away. Makes you wonder how many more cases are out there just waiting for someone to notice them again.
Probably a lot. Each one. A life cut short. A family with no answers. A community trying to heal. It's a heavy thought. But it should also make us want to do something. We can't let these cases be forgotten.
It's on all of us, right? Keep these stories alive, keep asking questions, keep pushing for justice.
Exactly. Even if they never solve the case, even if they never catch the guy, just remembering, acknowledging the victims, that matters.
Yeah.
It can help people heal.
That's true. We can't change the past, but we can learn from it. Hopefully make things better in the future. So let's get back to the Freeway Phantom. We've talked about the victims, the investigation, the suspects. But what about the killer himself? What was he like?
That's a big part of any serial killer case, right?
Mhm.
Trying to get inside their head. But with the Freeway Phantom, we don't even know who he was. Makes it even harder.
So what can we figure out? What does what he did tell us about him?
Well, you always start with the victims. In this case, young black girls,
Sure.
preteen, teenage. That tells you something about what he was looking for.
And the highways, what about that?
Maybe he knew the area well, used those roads a lot. Could also be about control, feeling like he could operate there no problem.
And the phone calls he made Brenda Crockett make.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Control, manipulation, not just of the victim, but of the whole investigation.
He wasn't just reacting, he had a plan.
Definitely. It's really chilling how thought out it all was.
What about that note in Brenda Woodard's pocket? Can we learn anything from that?
That note, you see, it might tell us a lot, but it's also
Yeah.
tricky. Some people think it's really what the killer was thinking. Others say it's just a way to mess with the cops.
So what are the theories about it?
Well, if that were tantamount, if Askins really used it that much, it could be him.
Yeah.
But even then, it doesn't mean he's the Phantom, right? Maybe he just knew the guy.
Yeah.
Or maybe the killer used that word on purpose, knowing people would think of Askins.
It's confusing. Every clue, it's like it leads nowhere or to a million different places.
That's cold cases for you. Try to put a puzzle together with half the pieces missing? Frustrating.
So what do we know for sure about the Freeway Phantom?
Okay, so it seems like he was organized, really careful about planning these crimes. He definitely targeted young black girls. And he's as comfortable around highways. That whole phone call thing, the note, that shows a need for control, for messing with people's heads.
That's about it, isn't it? We don't know who he was, why he did it, or why he stopped.
Nope. That's the mystery of the Freeway Phantom. All that pain, all those unanswered questions. It's like he's still out there.
Well, this is a good place to pause, let everyone catch their breath. We'll be back in a bit to wrap up our look at the Freeway Phantom. Okay, we've been really focused on the details, but zooming out, what do you think the Freeway Phantom's legacy is?
That's a good question. It's complicated.
Hmm.
I mean, first, there's the obvious. 6 young lives lost, families, shattered, still looking for answers after all this time.
And that fear, it must have changed how people live their lives.
Absolutely. Imagine living in D.C. back then, knowing this guy was out there. It changes everything, how you move through the world, how you raise your kids.
But there's also how the police handled it, right? What did they learn from all this? Did it change how they do things now?
Well, the early 70s. Police work was different then. Forensics, communication between departments.
Yeah.
And they didn't really understand serial killers that well. Not like today.
So the Freeway Phantom kind of showed them what they were missing.
Yeah, in a way. It showed the limits of what they could do, what they knew.
Yeah.
Forced them to get better.
I guess that's something positive, at least.
You always want to learn from these kinds of things. Try to prevent them from happening again. And the Freeway Phantom case, even though they never solved it, it definitely changed how they do criminal profiling, forensics, how they work together.
It makes you think we should never give up on these cases.
Exactly. Even if you don't find the guy, you can still learn things that might save someone else.
That's why places like the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, they keep studying these cases.
Yeah. They're looking for patterns, figuring out new ways to catch these guys.
It's like a battle,
Yeah.
between the evil that makes people do these things and the people trying to stop it.
It is. And you got to be on top of your game. Work together, come up with new ideas.
So I think we've covered just about everything on the Freeway Phantom. It's
Yeah.
a dark story, but it makes you think.
Definitely. Shows you how cruel people can be, but it shows how strong people can be too, even in the face of something like this.
And who knows, maybe someday, with new technology, new evidence, they'll finally solve it.
Yeah, that'd be something. This case. It sticks with you, makes you wonder. And hopefully, keeping the story alive, it might help get justice for those families.
Well, we hope you found this deep dive insightful and maybe even a little bit scary. It reminds us that the world can be a pretty messed up place, but it also shows that we're always trying to understand it better. We're always looking for answers.
And if anyone out there knows anything about this case, anything at all, please say something. Even a small detail could be what they need.
You never know what might help. It could be the missing piece that brings closure to those families and finally unmasks the Freeway Phantom. All right, that's it for today. Stay curious out there, everyone, and stay safe.